It is Independence Day weekend here in the US, and Vince and I, until about a week ago, didn't have any plans, but we randomly decided to book a hotel in Maryland. So Friday night we spent driving. We ended up sleeping in a rest stop in Pennsylvania, and then yesterday we spent a lot of the day driving. Driving through Pennsylvania was really beautiful. There were a lot of Amish farm stands. And then we made a quick detour down into Delaware because neither of us have ever been there before. We did some hiking, we went to the beach. We're heading out to Henlopen State Park right now, which is out on the coast. The first thing we did when we arrived at Cape Henlopen State Park was to climb one of the park's lookout towers to get an overview of the landscape. Back on the ground, we consulted a park map and ultimately chose to hike Gordon's Pond Trail, a shared biking and walking path that spans 3.2 miles through the forest, dunes, and wetlands. Hey, Vince. Wetlands are always a good place to go if you're looking for birds, and we did not leave disappointed. We saw snowy egrets, laughing gulls, green herons, willets, terns, great egrets, and more. We also came across a patch of blackberries perfect for a mid-hike snack. So today we're finally going to get around to going to Assateague Island, which is why we actually came down here. We have a wildlife cruise this morning. So the special thing about this island is that there's a herd of wild horses that live on it. Now, horses and ponies are not native to the US. Any wild herds you see are like feral populations descendant from domesticated horses. So the legend around here has it that these ponies actually swam ashore from the shipwreck of a Spanish galleon. And now today what we have on these islands are the descendants of these ponies. And now it's been so many years that they are fully wild, but the herds are managed by the Park Service and the Fire Service around here. Today we're going to the southern herd. Fingers crossed we'll see a bunch of them, but we won't know until we get there. Vince is probably even more excited to see wild ponies than I am, right, Vince?
So much more excited. You don't even like ponies compared to me.
I had read that one of the best strategies for seeing the ponies of the southern herd was to take a boat tour of the National Wildlife Refuge. So we met up with our guides from Barnacle Bill's Wild Pony Boat Tours for their morning wildlife cruise. Before long, we spotted our first band of ponies. This particular group was led by Riptide, one of Assateague's most famous stallions. We couldn't stay with Riptide's band for long because the tide was going out and we had to retreat to deeper water. But at least we saw plenty of birds along the way. Soon we were approaching Assateague Lighthouse, a 142-foot-high lighthouse that's been flashing warning lights to sailors since its completion in 1867. Another band of ponies was grazing near the lighthouse. This band's leader was Tornado, the tricolor buckskin on the right of this photo. When I was a kid, I went through a fairly significant horse phase, and like any good aspiring horse girl, I read Marguerite Henry's Misty of Assateague. It was so exciting to me to finally get to see the setting I read and daydreamed about as a kid.
Katie, what you looking at?
I could have sat and watched the ponies grazing all day, but our tour was nearing the end of its 2-hour runtime. On our way back from the lighthouse area, we were able to get really close to a bald eagle and caught a distant glimpse of one last band of ponies and their stallion, Beach Boy. We also stopped at Assateague Channel to learn about the annual pony penning event, a tradition that dates back to at least 1835.
On Wednesday morning early, the ponies come down around the marsh to where you see those banners to this little hump. It's called Pony Swim Island. The ponies rest there, then they swim over to right in between these two humps.
The boat tour ended up being a success. We actually saw 3 of the stallions that live here on Assateague Island. So their names are Riptide, Tornado, and Beach Boy. And we learned all about how they got to the island and about the pony penning event that will happen later this month. We won't be here for it, but that's when they round up all of the ponies and swim them across a channel, walk them down the main street of the town, and then they have a sail to sell off like excess ponies from the herd. The fire service manages the herd, but the National Park Service owns them, and there's only allowed to be 150 ponies living on the island at a time, so this is why they sell some of them off every year. Our guide on the boat tour had told us about a nearby spot where we could feed some of the ponies that have been sold at auction during pony penning. So we stopped by to check it out on our way into Assateague National Wildlife Refuge. So now we're heading into the wildlife refuge to check it out by land, and we're gonna try to hike every single trail they have today. Our goal of hiking all of the park's trails started out fine. It was hot outside, but the trails were flat and paved, so walking was easy. We started on the wildlife loop, then veered off towards the bivalve and woodland trails via Black Duck Trail. The second we reached the coastal forest, we ran into problems. Wow, anywhere where there's shade in this park, it's the mosquitoiest mosquito fest I've ever experienced. The second we stop moving, we get hounded by mosquitoes. We found a bit of respite from the mosquitoes when we reached the shoreline on the bivalve trail. There were lots of horseshoe crab carapaces strewn around the beach, and tiny crabs and snails near the waterline, along with the clams and oysters that the trail is named for. The mosquitoes couldn't be staved off for long though, and eventually we hightailed it the 4 miles back to our car, only making quick stops to check out the scenery and wildlife in the marsh. By the time we reached the parking lot, my legs were already covered in welts from mosquito bites, so Vince and I decided to surrender and go to the beach instead. Vince went for a swim, and I got sidetracked watching coquina clams burrow into the sand after being washed up by waves, until eventually we decided to drive back into Assateague to find somewhere to eat dinner. We were just driving to leave the park, and we actually saw a band of the ponies again along the side of the road, so this is a nice little goodbye for the day to the Assateague ponies. I recognized a few of the ponies from Riptide's band, and it was neat to get to see the first ponies we'd encountered one more time before leaving the park. Yesterday was a lot of fun. We saw about as many ponies as I think you could expect to see in a single day on Assateague Island. It was like 1,000 degrees outside, and I think I lost like 3 pints of blood to the mosquitoes. My legs are covered in welts today. Today we're headed to Assateague Island National Seashore. The pony situation there is slightly different. I've heard that the ponies like to hang out at the beach there and that you'll just see them along the road. We're gonna do a few hikes, but I think that the majority of today is gonna be a beach day. In an effort to avoid long entrance lines, we'd arrived at the National Seashore early and were the first people into the visitor center when they opened for the day. I bought some pony stickers, and then we drove into the park to begin our quest to find the northern herd. We're in Assateague National Seashore. We haven't seen any ponies yet. We have seen a lot of pony poop. So yeah, this is our first hike of the day. It's the Life of the Marsh Trail, and it's this nice boardwalk up over the marsh. More poop, still no ponies. Now we're on the Life of the Forest Trail. We saw pony hoof prints, a lot of pony poop. I distinctly could smell that the ponies had been there recently, but we still haven't seen a pony. Pony hoof prints, still no ponies. Right below the boardwalk right now, we've seen a mother sika deer and her fawn. These are actually an invasive species on Assateague Island. White-tailed deer are the native deer around here. These deer are much smaller and they're actually very adorable. Sika deer are native to Japan and were introduced to Assateague Island sometime in the 1920s. While biologists in Maryland initially feared that they would outcompete native white-tailed deer for resources, it's been found that sika deer mostly keep to habitats that are less favorable for whitetails. The sika deer management strategy is now to keep their population at a level where they can coexist with local farmers and native wildlife. We are on the third and final trail of the park, which is the Life of the Dunes Trail. Prickly pear cactus grow around here, and they are in bloom right now. One notable feature of the Life of the Dunes Trail is that it follows the remnants of Baltimore Boulevard, a 15-mile road that was built in the 1950s and destroyed by a nor'easter in 1962. Now the road serves mainly as a good place for seagulls to crack clamshells and a reminder of the past. Conveniently, the trail through the sand dunes shares a parking lot with the South Ocean Beach. Vince and I changed into our suits and took a swim in the Atlantic to cool off after our hike through the blazing hot dunes. Feeling rejuvenated from the cold water, we decided to regroup and try another strategy for finding the ponies, this time deciding to keep to the park roads instead of the trails. When we pulled up to the old ferry landing, we didn't find ponies, but we were just in time to join a crabbing program put on by some of the park's rangers.
If you catch a crab and your partner has a net, that partner can scoop that crab up right underneath there.
We dropped our bait into the water and soon we could feel curious blue crabs tugging at it. There were no hooks on our lines. The crabs would just grab onto the bait with their claws, and the trick was to pull them up slowly enough that they didn't notice and let go.
It's a little bit tough to keep them on there.
Yeah, it is.
Vince pulled up a crab within a few minutes and we got a chance to hold it before setting it free. Towards the end of the program, we noticed a band of ponies hanging out at a very distant point out in the marsh. This refocused me on the goal of finding the herd, so we hopped back into the car and continued driving through the park. Right, we were just driving down the road and we spotted some ponies in a nearby campground, so we can't drive in there. So we went and parked the car, and now we're just hoping the ponies will still be there once we walk over. They're literally in a campsite. It's the ponies. While it was definitely novel to see a trio of wild ponies rendering someone's campsite unusable, I still wanted to see some of them in a more natural environment. And some kayakers we'd seen paddling towards the band in the marsh had given us an idea. We rented this tandem kayak because out here on the point, right behind us, the ponies have been hanging out here for hours. Now, the second we approach the marsh, mind you, we're still hundreds of yards away at this point, the ponies start to move. And we can just see them in the distance, just trotting away. And now we're over here and they're totally gone. So that was a fruitless endeavor to find ponies. But we at least got to explore this marsh a little bit. Even though we'd failed at our mission yet again, we decided to paddle around a little longer to make good use of our 2-hour kayak rental. As we paddled past the area where the ponies had been mere minutes before, we spotted another band of ponies at the tip of the next point over. We would have to cover the same distance we'd already come again, but I was determined this time. After a bunch of paddling and a couple of mucky portages, we were floating right in front of the band of ponies, led by a chestnut stallion named Joy. It's so amazing that a truly wild experience like this can be had just 15 minutes away from the beachfront high-rises and amusement parks of Ocean City. Just when we thought we weren't going to get to see the ponies, we spotted some more off in the distance, and Vince was kind enough to humor me, and we paddled all the way out there as fast as we could, and yeah, we did get up to the ponies. It was definitely the coolest pony sighting we've had because, I don't know, it was just cool to have to paddle out to them, and we were the only people there. Now we're paddling back. This has been a really fun day. We didn't really have as many plans for today, but that ended up being just fine because we found lots of stuff to do here. As we drove toward the park entrance, it seemed that all of the ponies had come out of hiding and were now hanging out along the sides of the road and in parking areas. Look at this, right in the parking lot. There were a couple of park rangers making sure that visitors didn't get too close to these ponies, and they had a lot of interesting information to share, including that the naming rights to the northern herd are auctioned off to the public, resulting in some really bizarre pony names. As we finally left the park, there were dozens of ponies grazing along the side of the road, a perfect send-off to an amazing, very pony-themed weekend. Basically, we're just gonna spend the day checking out some stuff. Oh my god.
Good job.
Thanks. We're heading out to Henlopen State Park. Can you stop?